Thank you for watching this walk through Romans. Today we're in Romans, the first chapter, and we're going to begin with verse number 10. So get out your Bibles, read along with us as we look at this 10th verse of the first chapter of the book of Romans. Now the Apostle Paul in verse number 9 talks about how he prayed the gospel as Jesus as his witness, how he prayed the gospel for the people in Rome. And let me just remind you, the Apostle Paul's never been to Rome. He's praying something from his spirit. He's not praying something from his experience, but he's praying from his spirit, and he's praying the gospel. Jesus is there in heaven, and he's a witness. He's saying, yes, Father, I did that. That's the gospel. That's the gospel. And now the Apostle Paul continues talking about his prayer, and it's a different area of prayer now. But he says here in verse number 10, always in my prayers making request, if perhaps now at last by the will of God, I may succeed in coming to you. What's Paul doing? Paul's not only praying the gospel for the Romans, but now he says, I'm also praying. I am making a request to God. His prayer has changed. Now it's not only praying the gospel, praying what Jesus did, but now Paul is saying, I am making a request to God. And what is his request? He says it, if perhaps now at last by the will of God. Now that is a very important phrase. Now at last by the will of God. But what's he saying? Paul is saying, I am not going anywhere unless it's God's will. I am not going to go to Rome unless it's God's will. I'm not going to book my next ticket on the ship to go to Rome unless it is the will of God. Let me just say this, just because you have a desire on the inside of you, that does not mean it's the will of God for you to go and do that. Maybe God's calling you to prayer. Maybe that's the Spirit of God rising up on the inside of you, praying for the people in Rome or for the people of whatever your situation is. But just because you have a desire like Paul had, it does not mean it is the will of God for you to go book your next ticket to whatever city or go to wherever. Do you understand that? Desire is not the will of God. Desire, by the way, is many times the beginning of the will of God, but it isn't the timing of the will of God. You see, the will of God will put you in perfect timing. Now let's stop and think about this for a minute. Did the Apostle Paul ever go to Rome? Yes. The Apostle Paul went to Rome as a prisoner. But when he went to Rome as a prisoner, he was in a house. He was a prisoner there. He didn't have freedom to go. But you know what? He had complete freedom for people to come to him and minister to him, but him also to minister to them. And you know what? In the perfect will of God, you know what? Listen to me. God was using the Roman government to provide everything that Paul needed, even on-site security. The Roman government was paying for Paul's house, paying for Paul's meals. You see, in the will of God, you'll find the provision of God. So Paul here is showing us that he's got this desire, but he's saying, I am not going to move until it is the will of God. I am not going to leave where I'm at. I'm not going to leave Corinth until I know it is the will of God that I could come to you. Now, verse number 11. for I have longed to see you, so that I might impart some spiritual gift to you, that you may be established. What's the Apostle Paul saying? He's saying, I long to see you. I have a great desire to see you. And let me just say this. The will of God usually begins with a desire. And then as you pray over it, it begins to move. And then in God's perfect timing, it happens. But Paul says, I'm praying, I'm longing, I want to be with you. But then he says, I want to be with you so that I can give you something. So that I could come and give you a spiritual gift. Paul's not saying, I want to go to Rome so I can see the Colosseum. So I can hang out with the people in Rome and just have a good time and have a nice party and just, I just really want to be in Rome. I just really love the climate. I love the food. I could really use a lasagna right now. I'm being a bit facetious, or maybe not a bit, maybe a lot. But you understand that Paul is going there to do something. He's going there to bring a spiritual gift. Now, let me say this. What is the spiritual gift that the Apostle Paul is talking about? Well, we help to understand it by the next phrase, that it may establish you. Now, first of all, we know that the gospel is in Rome. We know that people are born again in Rome. So it's not the gospel of salvation. It's not the teaching of Jesus being Lord. That's already there. What is the gift that Paul is going to bring that's going to establish them? I believe it's the understanding or the revelation of faith and grace. In fact, he's going to bring the gift in this writing. He's going to tell them about faith and grace and righteousness and understanding their standing as righteous in God. He's going to do that here in the book of Romans. And so Paul is saying, I'm going to bring you a gift and it's going to establish you. And then verse 12, that is that I may be encouraged together with you while among you, each of us by the other's faith, both yours and ours. You know what? I don't have time to get into verse 12 today. I want to really thank you for watching. God bless you. Join us again tomorrow.